You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast. We have a very special treat for you here today because we have a very famous thriller author with a new book out that we love, and we're welcoming Michael Ledwidge here on BOOKSTORM today. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, we're very excited to talk to you. And before we get started, I'd like to tell our listeners just a little bit about you because you got a really cool bio. As you all know, he is the New York Times bestselling author. But did you know that Michael Ledwidge sold his first novel at the age of 26 years old? Wow. The Narrowback, which goes to prove my theory that I believe writers are a little bit born with it. Maybe it can be fine-tuned, but I think you're born with that gift. Then you followed with two more critically acclaimed novels. The second, Bad Connection, was optioned for film by George Clooney. Another
right.
Wow. We're not stopping there. Then you wrote 14 best-selling novels with one of the world's best-selling authors, James Patterson. There's a name we all know. The Michael Bennett series that you co-created, I see, is the highest selling New York City detective series of all time. Okay, I don't know how many wows we're up to, but we're getting good here. Then you've got your novel Zoo became a 3-season CBS television series. Well, many congratulations. I know it's very hard-earned, very well-deserved. I also love this about you. You're born and raised in New York City, one of my favorite places. I've got 2 kids working there. You have worked as a Park Avenue doorman. Wow.
That's right.
And a Manhattan outdoor telephone technician, where I'm going to come out and thank you because you participated in ground zero recovery efforts on 911. That's a story for another time I would love to hear, but thank you so much for getting in there and helping. We'll never forget that day. And now you're married. You got 3 children. You're living in the beautiful Manhattan suburb of Connecticut. Nice place to live. And welcome.
It's actually a different state.
Yes. You wouldn't know. Welcome to BOOKSTORM.
Well, Mike, we are here to talk about No Safe Place. And personally, I love this cover. So I want to make sure that our listeners and our viewers on YouTube get to see it. I like to give our listeners just a little bit of the background of what's going on in your story. Sure. It's going to be very brief because I don't want to give any spoilers away. And it's kind of hard in the story because there's all kinds of nonstop action and thrills. But just very briefly, we meet in this story Mike Gannon. And I love this character for so many reasons. But in this story, he is trying to relax. He wants to do some fishing. He's in a trout stream in the middle of rural New England, and he thinks he's going to have some downtime. Now, he bumps into an old friend who is investigating something. Her name is Colleen, and they know each other from way back. And I love that whole plot as well, which I'm not going to say too much about that. But she is looking into the very mysterious death of a student at a nearby college. Now, this nearby college is very elite, very prestigious. And, this was obviously something that, has shaken up a lot of people, what occurred. Right. But pretty soon, Colleen and Mike, I don't know, they've got some trouble on their hands. So he thinks he's going to be fishing, and all of a sudden he is right into the action. And we have a couple things that happen in this story, and I thought this was very cool without giving away too much. Okay. First, a whistleblower comes forward and has some new evidence about what may have happened at the college. And then a group of very dangerous men arrive. They will do anything to keep what happened under wraps and very secret. Right. And I love this line, then the lights go out.
Yep.
Do you want to add anything to
There
that
you go.
backdrop?
Yeah, it's one of my two favorite films and stories is I love the Stephen King. It was a short story first, The Mist. It became a film. But if you ever read the short story, it's one of his best stories. It's one of his best written stories. It's all about a group of people who are under stress, surrounded. So that whole idea of being under siege, which is regular people, that was one of the biggest things that kind of prompted the story. And I also love the movie Die Hard. That's like my favorite movie of all time. You know, I grew up, I graduated from college in 1992. And as you guys probably know, like from the mid 80s to the early 90s, there were so many great thriller movies, and Die Hard being one of them. And so that's one of the things that when I started the Gannon series, this is the fourth book in the Gannon series, that whole action thriller vibe from the late 80s, all those great films, that's what I really try to put into each and every story. You know, I really try to make it into like kind of a feature film. So this one kind of, you know, the elevator pitch would be just in my own head was Die Hard meets the Mist.
Excellent.
So
Well,
there's
given the
action, and then
mayhem,
there's like the tension of people being kind of stuck in and the walls are closing in. So
excellent. Yeah, I'm going to use the word mayhem because that's what unfolds. It's
there you
awesome.
go.
We're getting into that with my second question and Kristen's first, but you do know Die Hard is listed as a Christmas movie, which I've never been able to quite figure that one out. But
Yeah, it's right because it's in California. Yep, that's right.
Well,
Yeah,
let me tell
one of the best
our-
ones of all time.
I loved it. Who doesn't love it? I've got to tell our listeners. So you're going to love our two heroes, protagonists, Mike Gannon, former Navy SEAL, NYPD detective. Then in comes Colleen, the investigator for a law firm. They were each that one person willing to stand up for justice. I like when Mike said this: if the cops out there weren't doing their job, I would. If the corrupt courts aren't going to prosecute, then fine, I'll be that judge too. This is fiction, but there's some truth in here. That's what I love about fiction. We've got corrupt lawyers, police, politicians, we can go on and on, FBI judges. Did you show us through Mike and Colleen that even one voice standing up for justice matters? Because this is not easy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that really spoke to me when I was growing up was heroic characters standing up for other people. One of my favorite movies when I was a little kid was reruns of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. If you ever watched that film, I remember seeing that when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and just being so psyched about just the way that he was so brave and so bravely stood up against such powerful people. The way he kind of thumbed his nose at the king. That was just something that I was always like really mesmerized by that from a very early age. Because again, I grew up in the Bronx, grew up playing on the corner, and it was like basically like playing in a schoolyard, but there's no teachers around. So there's a lot of bullying ever since I was a very little kid. And so I knew that whole world. So when I saw this film, I said, wow, that is so incredible. That's so inspiring. And so I think that's one of the things that really kind of turned me into a writer and wanted to write heroic stories and wanted to write, great popular fiction about heroes. And because again, if you look at the history of the world, it's like, it's basically series of injustices where some very brave people standing against really bad odds who stand up. And the last thing I'll say in that is that I always think about when I think about heroism, that there was a psychological experiment. I forgot the name of it. Basically what they did was that there was an experiment where a subject was brought into a room where there's 5 people already there, 6 people, and he thinks that they're all part of this experiment or whatever. And basically, they're shown, I believe it's a picture of 2 lines, and one line is definitely longer than the other one. And they're asked which line is longer, and it's very easy to tell. But all the people there who were in on the kind of experiment, they all pick the wrong line to say that this line is longer, and they get to him, and he's the last one. So usually the subject would go along with everybody else, even though it's obvious that everybody else was wrong. Because of the peer pressure, he would say, okay, I'll go along with what is wrong. So that's one experiment. But in the greater experiment, what they did was that they brought in another person. So that, let's say there was 10 people, but out of the 10 people who said the wrong thing, one other person would say the right thing, would say like, okay, this, the correct answer. And in almost every case, because that one person said the right answer, even though all the rest of them said the wrong answer, that the subject would go along and say the right answer because one other person had said it already. And that is the importance, to my mind, of heroism, of opening your mouth, even though it's dangerous and maybe sometimes people pay that kind of courage with their life, but it is extremely important, especially if there's something real, if it's really important. And so that's one thing that always strikes me is that by standing up sometimes, I mean, you have to, I guess, pick the hill you want to die on sometimes, right? But there is a definite, one person can definitely change everything by being courageous.
I love that theory. And we can see it played out in fiction in a more perfect way with a good ending. And sometimes in real life, we're too afraid of the consequences. But books like this, with characters like this, they give us a little courage.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what storytelling is for. It absolutely is to give people courage. I mean, it has a very, a lot of people think it's just for entertaining, and it's obviously it's entertaining, but it really does. That is truly, I think, the more important purpose is to encourage. Because if you look at, like, for example, not to get too literary, because I love popular fiction, but if you look at William Faulkner's Nobel Prize winning speech, where he talks about the purpose of stories is to encourage people, to encourage heroism, to that is really the purpose of writing, I think, of fiction. It's to encourage people. It's to get people to be good people.
Well
to have the courage to do it, because it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, I want to ask you about fictional Beckford College in your story.
Sure.
This is a place where the elite sent their children. And I was wondering, that left those young adults vulnerable to people who might want to manipulate them or use them. And there's some real life colleges and situations like Beckford. Do you think that students are aware, and young people are aware generally, of how much their choices can impact their later lives? Because they're on social media, things are being documented, and they don't necessarily have that ability to forecast down the road what could happen. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have 3 kids. I sent three kids through college, so I know all about this. And one of the things that did strike me when my kids went to school was the amount of like security cameras on campus, and the fact that that in this day and age, and even with people who have with the cell phones, everybody has a camera. Because when we were growing up, at least when I was growing up, there was none of that. So if young people make mistakes, they do crazy, funny things, whatever. But at least it's not recorded for all time, the way that it can be today. So I definitely think that young people today, there's a vulnerability to that, and also just in terms of a parent, I was just thinking about this whole idea that to tell, to kind of throw it out to other parents to think, wow, that like these colleges really do. If a kid goes away to this college, these colleges really do have a lot of sort of power over your kids. They can watch them. They can have them on film, and it's just something to, food for thought. Just to be careful, to watch out, because in this day and age of 24/7 surveillance in some of these places where it's not as it's just something you have to think about today, which I think stinks. I think it would be great if that wasn't the case, I think, but
yeah, I agree. And that's why I liked your title so much, No Safe Place, right? Because we got that on a couple different levels in this story, but that was one that really struck me. So
yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I have two kids graduated, and I said to them, don't do anything dumb at college because everyone's recording everything. You might want to be a senator someday. They said, Mom, we don't want to be a senator. I said, I don't care. Just don't be caught filming. Because I'm like you. When I went to college, we had the old fashioned camera with the film. And all I'm going to say is thank God for that, because I made it out of there pretty clear without any trouble.
Right. Absolutely. Right. That's right.
But
There's
I
no
wanted,
evidence. What stayed in college, what happened in college stayed in college back then. So it stinks that it's different now
yeah, it does.
for them.
There's a scene in the story that really hit me and Kristen. We were talking about this hard. Chaos unfolds in a small town, but everybody believes the lies they're being fed. We have an antagonist, Shaw, who thinks, and I'm going to quote, these people, look at them, how easily it is to control them. A badge and an authoritative tone, a voice, and literally they're hypnotized. Here's another fact, but fiction statement. And it just made the reader think, are we a people today who blindly follow authority? Okay, a hurricane just came through. I'm down in the Carolinas. I got a buzz on my phone. It said, stay home, danger, flooding. Then I have a friend of mine call me and say, I'm over here at Marshall's. There's a line, come out and shop. But I'm terrified. Can we not think for ourselves?
It's I don't think it's a matter so much of that we're more vulnerable today. I think people have always been vulnerable to just going along with authority. Like we have a human beings, in order to have civilization, you need to be able to kind of trust other people and to work with other people and everything else. And we're also taught when we're kids to listen to our parents. So we grow up, we're told you have to listen to authority. But at a certain point, when you become an adult and when you leave the home, some people might have the tendency to kind of transfer this kind of parental authority onto, say, government officials, police officers, priests, doctors, whoever, and just have this assumption that that these parental figures, just like your parents, have your best interests in mind. And most of the time it's probably true that people are honest and they have your best interest in mind. But the whole idea is that you never know who's lying to you. All human beings are capable of lying, and it's just you have to be. I think at all times people have to kind of be a little bit skeptical about everything that they hear, and try to use your own mind to kind of figure out the plausibility of what you're being told. Because again, like I said, one of the things that I was kind of one of the good things about my childhood, which sometimes was kind of rough, was from a very early age, learning that people can be very deceptive, and especially older kids. Because I got introduced to the corner basically when I was about 6 years old, and I came outside and I had a tennis ball, and one of the older kids, because there used to be a lot of kids hanging around, and one of the older kids said, "Hey, Mikey, come on, you want to have a catch?" And I said, "Oh, look, this is so nice. One of the older guys wants to have a catch with me." So I threw him the tennis ball, and of course, the next thing that he did, he took the tennis ball and he threw it up on the roof, and he laughed at me, and all of his friends laughed at me, and I remember going, "Wow, I did not think that was going to happen." It was, but it did. I learned a lesson. I said, "Wow, okay, only trust my mother, only trust my mother and father." I had no idea that kids who are older, who should know better, were capable of being that deceptive. And so again, I learned at a very early age, like, okay, keep your head on a swivel for maybe people being deceptive toward you. So that's just something I kind of threw in there, just because it's something, again, food for thought.
Yeah, it really made you think. It did. Thank you.
Yeah. Michael Gannon told one of the bad guys that he was, and this is a quote, a man with a cause, and that right now his cause was surviving at all costs by all means necessary. Now, Michael became wildly inventive to keep their pursuers at bay, and as the stakes got higher, his mind was alert to every possible method of escape. What is it about danger that heightens our senses? And is that ability to harness danger one of Michael's greatest strengths?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. like I said before, one of the things that I really love, I loved about the movies of the 80s and the early 90s, like all those great action thrillers, and where people get into very dangerous scenes. And one of the things that for example, like if you look at the movie like Heat, with the bank robbery scene where the guys, the bank robbers coming out of the front of the bank, and then the cops show up and there's this enormous shootout. Or you look at like in a film like Taken, where Liam Neeson goes into the room where all the kidnappers are, all these thugs are there. There's like 10 thugs, and you're like, wow, how's he going to get out of this? Like this seems to be an extremely dangerous sort of setup. I've always loved that all that action. And when you look at it, it's like, I believe that they call it the people who like the sublime, right? So there's a kind of an attraction that people have to watching very dangerous things happen. It's like sort of like what I think the example they use is that if there's a gigantic storm, and let's say you're on the edge of a cliff, and you look down at the sea crashing into the rocks in a way that if you were down there, it would definitely kill you. So there's a kind of feeling of, I guess, of awe that comes out of watching things that are extremely dangerous and extremely exciting and that could possibly kill you. So I think that's definitely something, again, especially when I was a young man, all that kind of shoot 'em up stuff and even war films and everything else was something that definitely attracted me to stories and sort of like the same kind of draw of going on a roller coaster. Very much the same thing. That this thing seems like an out of control train, you're going to die. That same sort of feeling is what I'm shooting for when I write all these cool kind of action sequences.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about this character, Mike Gannon, because he thrives in that kind of environment. And the more you throw at him, he just becomes sharper and more clever and more inventive. So that was very fun watching that.
Thank you. Yeah. And also what's cool as well is using, because again, just one of the things that interested me in the Mike Gannon character, making him an ex-SEAL, an ex-combat veteran, was the fact that it's actually, in this age with the whole war on terror and all these guys who went to Iraq and all these forces guys who went to Afghanistan and everything, and who are all back in the United States. So there is a kind of I don't know if more than any other time, maybe in Vietnam or in World War II, but there's a lot of combat vets in who are around today. There's a lot of guys walking around who are very skilled at all this stuff. And so that was one of the things when I came up with the Gannon character that I wanted to kind of go, yeah, this is again, even there's a thriller writer right now. What's his name? He's like he got on the bestseller list.
We have a lot of them on here, but if we pick one and not all of them, we're in trouble. Who?
Okay.
Who?
Jack Carr.
Oh yeah.
Jack Carr, but he's a SEAL. He was an actual SEAL himself. Which is
that's cool.
There's a lot, and again, you see there's a lot of YouTube channels and a lot of these ex-special forces guys. It's part of our culture, so I kind of wanted to I like kind of ripping things from the headlines, when you come up with this stuff. And so that's just one thing I wanted to cover with the character.
Yeah. Well, you conveyed that. Yeah. He's a great character. Well, Mike, we're so thankful that you came on the show. And before we let you go and tell our listeners how to get in contact with you, we're wondering if you can give us a glimpse as to what you're doing next. What's on the radar?
Right now I'm working on the next Gannon, which would be the fifth Michael Gannon story. I won't tell you anything about it. But I'm also thinking about, I'm in the preliminary, I was going to launch a Substack about writing, about the writing life and writing instruction and blah, blah, blah. But I still have to put that together, but in the next couple of months.
Excellent. Well, we will keep an eye out for that. And of course, we want you to come back on the show with your next book that's in the doing. And of course, if you want to bring James Patterson along, we'd love to have you both interview you, of course.
If I'm speaking to him, I shall ask.
Okay.
But I'll tell our listeners too, you have a great website and it's michaelledwidge.com. You're also on Amazon. You have a great bio and ways to purchase your books on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. And again, thank you so much for coming on to
Thank
discuss this
you,
awesome book
Mr.
with
Kristen.
this
Yeah,
fantastic
this was
cover.
fun. Thank you.
Bye, Mike.
Bye-bye now.
You know, Kristen, what a great author and what a great novel. And I'm really happy to hear that he's thinking about doing some books about the technique and skill of writing. I love those kind of books. That was a lot of fun. What do you think about this? I just hit me so hard. I love that he put his own life experiences into the characters in his story. And I think all authors do, but maybe we don't readily realize we're doing it. And how did you think about this one person standing up for good in the real world, in our everyday lives? This is not always easy, is it? You come under criticism, you could come under danger. This is a tough thing, but I really admire it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exhausting, I think. And, you know, in today's world, given social media, there's always people who will disagree with you and criticize you just for the sake of disagreeing or criticizing. They may even agree with you and they still do it. So you have an onslaught, I think, of negativity. And it's hard to stand up for what's right in the face of that, especially when it's prolonged. And so I loved in this story, you know, we had a lot of odds stacked against these two, but they drew on every resource, every bit of their experience, their intellect, their creativity. And I think that's what it takes to stand up to wrong things. It takes drawing on all of your skills and your abilities and being creative to tackle the problems that you see in the world.
And I want to be the devil's advocate here. And when we had the scene where the town was in chaos, and I don't want to give anyone away, but everyone is locked up listening to Don't Leave Your House. A little bit, I thought, maybe there's a shining light in social media. Maybe that's one way for people to actually do get truth out. Maybe sometimes a rumor is a little bit of truth. We see mostly the negative of it, lots of fake news, lots of drama. But it occurred to me that maybe in today's day and age, because of our higher level of communication, maybe there's a little something good in social media.
Oh,
Maybe.
absolutely. Look, it keeps certain people honest. Sometimes it keeps the government honest because when you see things with your own eyes, a video, you know that maybe there is something to it. And so I agree with you. I think there are very positive things and very negative things about social media. But one of the positive things is it keeps people honest or it exposes wrongdoing when it needs to be exposed.
I like
So,
that. I just loved it. Everything in here just made me think about real life today.
yeah.
And what could this happen today? And guess what? It could. Everything in
Yeah.
this book, it could. And also, thank you, Mike Ledwidge, for saying that there's Navy SEALs scattered all over. This gives me huge peace. I'm actually very happy
Yeah.
thinking that, we're protected by people who have retired from our military forces. I never thought of that before. I really like that.
Yeah. I've always thought we should put them in schools and, you know, just as another set of eyes and ears. I think there's a lot of people who've retired from the armed forces or law enforcement who I wish we could have them in the right place where we need them. And that is
Teachers,
maybe in schools.
teaching,
That's
guiding.
right. That's right.
Loved it.
Yeah, this is an awesome book. Well, I want to tell our listeners about some other authors that we have coming up. We've got quite the lineup. We have Preston and Child, Angel of Vengeance, Jamie Brenner, A Novel Summer, Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado with Fatal Intrusion, Brian Freeman for Robert Ludlum, writing for that entire franchise, The Born Shadow. We have Brian Freeman coming back to talk about one of his standalone books, Break Every Rule. We have Amy Runyon with Mademoiselle Eiffel, Shelley Noble, The Colony Club, Amy Neff, The Days I Loved You Most, Jessica Strauser, Catch You Later, Fran Littlewood, Amazing Grace Adams, M.P. Woodward for Tom Clancy franchise with a book called Shadow State. We have Lori Frankel with Family, and we have Robert Dugoni, Beyond Reasonable Doubt. We're so excited about it. Now, listeners, thank you for spreading our social media. We ask that you continue to do that. You're tuning in from, 90 countries now and 1,900 different cities, all 50 US states. That is so exciting. And we're just thankful for you and that you're plugging in and tuning in. And listeners, we want you to stay on the radar with us. You can find us, as you might know, at bookstormpodcast.com. We're on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, on YouTube. And of course, until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.